Good evening and welcome to the April 15th, 2019 meeting of the Coeur d'Alene Parks and Recreation Commission meeting. Melissa, would you get us started with roll call, please?
Commissioner Cranston?
Here.
Commissioner McDowell?
Here.
Commissioner Lean?
Here.
Commissioner Tate? Commissioner Hill? Commissioner Wood?
Here.
Commissioner Ettinger? Commissioner Kennard?
Yeah.
Okay, we have a quorum tonight, and I understand Commissioner Hill will just be coming to the meeting late tonight. So, Melissa, if you would, just note when she comes and add her to the members present list. If I can ask everybody to stand, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance, and Commissioner Jim Kennard will lead us.
Pledge of allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good job. Thank you, Jim.
Yep, you're welcome.
Do any of the commissioners tonight have a conflict of interest with any of the agenda items?
None here.
Okay.
Sir.
That moves us on to approval of the March 18th, 2019 meeting minutes. Does anybody have any corrections or clarifications? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve the March 18th minutes.
Okay, is there a second? Second. Okay, try it again.
In harmony.
Okay. The motion's been made by Commissioner Wood to approve the March 18th, 2019 meeting minutes, and seconded by Commissioner Lean. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, minutes are approved unanimously. So rolling right along here, Bill, that brings us to staff report.
Well, we're in full swing. Everything is popped, so to speak. The snow's gone, and we're registering for last week. It was soccer and swim and skiing. Actually, now timbers are out in the fields and using things. Our restrooms are open. We're getting ready for Easter. We've got a couple of Easter hunts around town, so look in the paper for those. We did something kind of interesting this morning. We, as you know, have been looking at the Atlas Mill site. And our superintendent, Jeff Erickson, had spied something that was from that old mill site at Forest Steel. And so he contacted the Steel family, or the Forest family, and spoke to Grant Forest and asked about this flywheel that Jeff had seen in their yard. And Grant said, well, it turns out to be my dad's. And so here's his number. And so Jeff and I went over and met with Mr. Steel, or Mr. Forest, at Steel Forest, Forest Steel. Anyway, he was a great guy, loved talking to him, but he picked this flywheel off of this site that was delivered to that site in 1906 by wagon and horse. It weighs 15,000 pounds. And it was a piece that ran the belt that ran the big blade. And there were two wheels, and we got both of those. And so he salvaged those from that yard to save them for historical purposes. When everybody else was there picking for steel and scrap steel, he picked it just to save it. And so he's real excited about gifting that to us to use at the Atlas site. So we're real excited about that. And we're hoping to reach out to the museum and see if they may have an accompaniment piece that would go with that as well. So we did that this morning at 8 o'clock with them. And we're gonna put together Jeff Crow, who the man behind the lens over here always in the booth, put together a really nice, we'll put together a really nice video about this. Similar to how he did when we rescued the Osprey. That was all Jeff Crow's doing, and so I'm certain he'll do a great job with this one as well. And it was kind of cold, Jeff had told me, so they completed the interview with Mr. Forrest inside. And so at some point, when we bring that back, we'll finish the story, and you guys will all see a really, really cool video about that.
That's so great.
It's great, exciting.
Mr. Chair, could I ask?
Yes.
That is so exciting because the timber theme, the celebration of the mills in this community will be the theme of the Atlas site. I'm wondering, hopefully the Richards family or maybe the DeArmonds, maybe they have something historical that would be appropriate for that
That would
site.
be wonderful if some people have that stuff stored and they
Any
get
of you
in
have connections
contact with us.
them.
That would be very, very nice.
Yeah, great,
you.
thank you.
Anything else, Bill? Any questions for Bill? Hi, Bridget.
Hi there.
You're very stealthy.
Everyone can never.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Do any of the commissioners have any comments or announcements tonight? Okay. Next is public comments. Is there anyone in our audience that wishes to address the commission that isn't here for one of the agenda items tonight? Okay, none? Okay, our next item then is an information item regarding Arbor Day celebration announcement and Arbor Day Art Contest Award. Bill, do you want to introduce?
So this is Nick Goodwin, our new urban forester after we lost Katie. Nick was an internal in-hire. We interviewed, we actually went outside and had other interviewees. And Nick was the one that rose to the top, and so he's here to talk about Arbor Day.
Okay, it's all yours, Nick.
Hello.
Welcome.
Nice to meet all of you, for some of you for the first time, some of you not. But here today to talk about Arbor Day 2019. First, this year for Arbor Day, we are in working conjunction with the new Workers Memorial, which is being constructed at City Park. I working with Brad Cedarblum from the North Idaho Labor Council, and we are going to be planting 7 trees, 2 flowering dogwoods, white dogwoods, and 7 cypress trees on a bank behind the wall that you can see in this photo. That's going to start at 11 o'clock. We'll have everything prepped as far as digging, so it'll be some teaching about root pruning and proper planting techniques. We're going to have some volunteers from different tree companies and the Urban Forestry Committee and the Arbor Day Association of North Idaho will be there to help. And we'll have coffee and tree info and get some trees planted and get that cleaned up because they're going to have a celebration there the very next day. So they're going to be opening that on Works Memorial Day. From there, we're going to move across the street over to the new Memorial Skate Park by the gazebo. Here we're going to have a celebration where we have a free lunch that is for attendees that is sponsored by Sun Valley Tree Service. We're going to be giving away seedlings to all attendees. It'll be first come, first serve. We'll have some door prizes for attendees, as well as including some free trees that are being donated by local nurseries. And we're going to have our art on display from our art contest that we put on in conjunction with the Arbor Day organization in North Idaho.
Nick, what are going to be the tree species for
There
the seedlings?
There are 2 varieties of dogwood that we have this year, as well as a variety of cork tree, and they have gotten over 3,000 trees for the local area. They'll be doing a lot more than that for the local area. I believe it's 3,000 for the local 4th graders. We'll have about 100 seedlings to give away to attendees. We're also giving out those same seedlings are going to go out to 4th grade students, and we'll be giving them to students at our library Arbor Day program we do for preschoolers. So. Anyway, for as far as stats for the Tree City USA stats that we had for 2018, as you can see, we planted 565 public trees and planted 200 seedlings as of this date. We've had 224 public trees removed in 2018, and through the tree maintenance, we've had 1,345 public trees pruned. Seedling bagging. On April 23rd at the IDL warehouse at 9 a.m. we're going to be packing our seedlings to be giving away for Arbor Day. These have to be, we put them what's referred to as slime, which is exactly what it sounds like, and it is a mixture of fertilizer that keeps those in the bag and ready to be planted. From there, as I mentioned, we're going to have our children's library program April 24th at 10:30. That's going to include a tree-themed story time for children, and then we are going to, from there, I will do a presentation about the importance of Arbor Day, as well as we're going to have some hands-on tree identification opportunities for them to learn the difference between different foliage, and we're going to have some microscopes set up so they can actually have a little bit of fun learning how trees actually work and what they do. And then as far as that, we have the tree planting on Tubbs Hill. We are coordinating another seedling planting on Tubbs Hill with the Project High School in Coeur d'Alene. So we're working on that. I'm working on that right now. And here we have our sticker button art contest. This year's winner, as you can see, was Chelsea Rotenberg from Lakeland High School. This is the art that she produced, which will be made into stickers and buttons to be handed out at Arbor Day celebration and different schools and different places all through Coeur d'Alene. Here's our winners for that contest. As you can see, we had 6 overall winners from different high schools throughout the Coeur d'Alene area. This art contest is put on in conjunction with the Arbor Day organization of North Idaho. We have a board that chooses the winners that will go to the schools, and the 4th grade students locally choose these winners as you see before you today. So these were all chosen by 4th grade students. Then we have our poster contest for 5th grade students, and we at the Urban Forestry Committee choose the winners of this contest. We're lucky enough to have one of our winners for today, our overall winner, River Kermelis from Dalton Elementary, is here today. I'd like to ask River to come up and receive her trophy if she would like to. So we had this trophy made. It is a slice of elm, and it is engraved with your name as the first winner. Congratulations, River, and thank you so much.
Yeah, congratulations.
Beautiful, River.
Thank you.
Good job. And we had 3 overall winners for this contest. River's the only one who's here today, but and all of our button art is on display in the library for anyone to view, and it will be there for the rest of the month. This art will be just on display at our Arbor Day celebration. And from there, we invite everyone, including the Parks and Rec Commission, to join us at Arbor Day this coming Saturday, April 27th, 11 o'clock. And we have lunch starts at 12:30, and we'll go till probably around 2 o'clock or whenever anybody wants to go home. So from there, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Nick? I have one, Nick. You're our new urban forester here, as Bill introduced you. Is any exciting projects or programs you're working on right now?
You know, I am starting a few programs that I really feel one of the most important things that I find when I deal with tree issues in Coeur d'Alene is just trying to educate the public on what's required for public tree, what the process is for working on public trees. And I feel most people don't know very much about trees, even though they would like to. So I am trying to start at least monthly press release program to have educational information out for homeowners and business owners in Coeur d'Alene to learn about trees. You might see the first one is coming out tomorrow. It's a press release that's really simple. It's about what's the processes for working on public trees. As far as other projects that we have going on, we have the Relief Coeur d'Alene project, which is an annual project we do. We're going to be planting about 70 trees in Coeur d'Alene this year, free of charge to residential homeowners in the city of Coeur d'Alene. This is to fill street tree locations that have not been filled, either by they have a permit that wasn't filled for a street tree, or it's just a location that has not yet been planted. And the funding for this comes through the permit process. Permits, when a home is built in Coeur d'Alene, they have a residential street tree permit. If that permit gets forfeited, it goes into an account where we use that to plant these trees. So about 70 trees being planted this year, as well as we have some pruning projects. We're coordinating with the volunteers in pruning. We're going to start with a pruning project here at McEwen Park, doing some structural pruning on young trees. And from there, that's what I've got on my table right now, but always open to suggestions that anyone would like to see us take on. So,
Thank you, Nick.
thank you very much.
The next item is an action item regarding renewal of the BMX agreement. The decision tonight would be the BMX Association agreement is up for a 3-year renewal. Recommendation is to renew the agreement. The BMX Association was a major contributor to the BMX track at Cherry Hill. They provided the equipment, labor, and most of the material to construct the track. The association has also been the main contributor to maintaining the track and preparing it for event use. The track has been in place for 12 years and has been very successful in engaging youth in the sport of BMX bicycling. The BMX Association is saving us a lot of costs with regard to maintaining the track, since they do have the vast majority of the work. They will continue to do the maintenance of the track, which also includes litter and debris removal within the vicinity of the track. Attached is the agreement that spells out the responsibilities and expectations of the BMX Association and the city. The renewal will be subject to the same terms and conditions as the prior agreements. Again, the decision point tonight, whether to renew the agreement for 3 more years with the option for an additional 3-year renewal, provided that everything runs smoothly with BMX Association's responsibilities. Bill, do you have anything more to add?
Yes, a typo. It's not 12, it's 15 years.
15 years?
So Terrence Northern is the man in charge. He and his partner, Randy Kane, came to our office 15 plus years ago and came with the idea of this BMX track. Randy has since passed away. We've got a plaque there for memorializing him. But Terrence is back in control of the track, and we're golden now with Terrence running the show. So everything's running really well. We have a new thing we're working with them. They're associated with the National BMX Association. They are working through us to provide, we're doing the registration lessons to little guys, much smaller. And so they're providing the gear and the helmets, so anybody who's interested, just get to our office and they'll teach them how to ride BMX. And so it's a new venture. It's similar to what Skyhawks does with us throughout the summer. So this is, again, a national organization that our BMX Association is affiliated with. And so they're going to run it with the help of the National Association, along with us doing the registration.
Okay. So as far as the agreement, really the only thing that's changed is the dates for the new 3-year renewal
Pretty much,
period.
because they do such a phenomenal job. And you know, we communicate regularly, and Terrence is really good. We had a meeting a few months ago discussing what I just explained to you or shared with you. And so, yeah, we've got ongoing dialogue about what they need or something's wrong. We're there for them, and they're there for us. So it's a great partnership.
Great. Any questions, comments?
I guess I would just make a comment. I can recall when this first came into being, there was a lot of consternation on the part of a lot of the neighborhood residents, noise and whatever perceptions might be there. And I think it's been worthy of note that none of that has materialized. And it's really been a great addition to the community, and I think the kids really do enjoy it. Hear a lot of great comments from both participants and spectators, if you will.
If you recall, it seemed to me that there were lots of folks, and I was included in that, and when it first came forward about BMX, I was thinking about motorcycles, not so much powered by feet. And when that was dispelled and went away, people, oh, okay, I get it. You know, so you're right. It's been a great program.
Yeah. Any discussion or motion?
Do you want to do a motion, Mike?
Sure, I'd be glad to make a motion that we renew the agreement, or recommend that the city council renew the agreement for another 3 years.
I'd second.
Okay. Motion's been made by Commissioner McDowell and seconded by Commissioner Wood to recommend to City Council to renew the agreement with the BMX Association for 3 more years. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that is approved unanimously. Now that goes to General Services.
Correct.
Next Monday?
Correct.
Okay. Our next item is also an action item. It is in regards to this year's 3 nominees for the Rock of Fame in Memorial Park. The nominees are Scott Reed, Ron Ettinger, and Charlie Knipp. So, do you want to lead off, Bill? And
Well, what we've done in the past is, these originated from you, this commission, and I concur with everybody's choice. And I think these three individuals have done remarkable things for our community, and I just like them to get on the rock.
Mr. Chair, do you
Christie?
mind if I
Would
tell
you-
a little
would you
bit?
mind? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I nominated Scott and Ron, and there's a lot to tell about the late Scott Reed. I'll just read it real quickly. Scott's legal career spanned nearly 60 years, placed him on the front lines of battles to protect natural areas, wildlife habitat, and public access to places like Tubbs Hill, Sanders Beach, the NIC Beach, and McEwen Field in our beautiful city of Coeur d'Alene. Scott and his wife Mary Lou, along with the late Art Manley, were some of the founding members of the Friends of Tubbs Hill, which has long advanced the protecting of a 165-acre natural area for public use. Scott also authored the book, The Treasure Called Tubbs Hill, which chronicles the long road to preserving Tubbs Hill. Among Scott's many gifts to our city include acquiring a loan on his own part. Did you guys know that? He took that loan out for a nonprofit so the city of Coeur d'Alene could purchase and preserve Tubbs Hill for the public for generations to come. It was recently valued at over $500 million. Tubbs Hill remains one of our area's more popular attractions. In 1956, Scott was an active member of the Lakeshore Development Committee, who successfully lobbied against a shopping mall that was to be built at our current site of McEwen Field. During the next 20 years, this group, with the help of civic groups and matching federal grants, built ball fields, tennis and basketball courts, and a small playground. In 1972, the Reeds and Manley founded Kootenai Environmental Alliance, the oldest nonprofit conservation organization in Idaho, which describes itself as a watchdog over the Idaho Panhandle National Forest and other federal lands. Scott served as the attorney for Save the NIC College Beach Committee at no cost from 1972 to 76, when he helped successfully prevent the construction of condos on what today is the Yaphank Public Beach. He negotiated the purchase price of the beach at NIC for $260,000. And in 2006, this is quite some time ago, he had an assessment of value done on that beach, and at that time it was valued over $68 million. One can only imagine what it's worth today, but it's priceless to our community, and Scott knew that. All of Scott's legal efforts on these public projects were done pro bono. He was on a number of different boards. I won't go into that, but I will tell you, in 2014, there's a wonderful quote from Scott. At the age of 86, he wrote an article for the Spokesman Review capturing the history of McEwen Field and the vision for the future as the park was undertaking the major renovation. He said, "The message here is that those who still oppose the idea of McEwen are going to lose any argument they may have with a 6-year-old girl. To complete my analogy, you're surrounded by the Everest of a modern-day city park with full view and the opportunity to use this entire area." That was from Scott. The vision of Art Manley, May McEwen, and the rest of us followed up 48 years later has far exceeded our greatest expectations. Thank you all for making McEwen Park happen. So, Mr. Chair, I'm honored to nominate Scott Reed for the Rock of Fame as we do our part to preserve his legacy. Scott Reed is a true measure of a man.
thank you.
Do you want me to go on with the
Yes, if you
second
would
one? All right.
mind, give Ron's nomination. I don't think Sandy Emerson is here, who nominated Charlie Knipp, but if you're on a roll, you might
Oh,
go
okay.
ahead
I'm happy
and
to.
read into the record his
They're-
nomination letter
They're
as well.
great. Well, I wish Ron was here tonight because it's an honor to nominate him. Everyone knows Ron. He has served our community for 50 years. He was as a councilman and as a term as a mayor. He's been on the Park and Rec Committee for decades. Bill, I didn't have the exact number of years. I didn't know if you did. I knew I was good with decades.
Decades works.
And he lent his voice and his vision for the amazing parks our city enjoys today. He had direct involvement, along with Scott, in the purchase of Tubbs Hill, the development of Independence Point, the Kroc Center, and Riverstone. He was also instrumental in preserving Persons Field on 15th Street as a public open space when it was earmarked for development. Ron has been dedicated to local athletes, mostly as an umpire for 26 years for softball, park and recreation, and American Legion baseball, and and on the high school, college, and national levels. He has spent more time in our parks than anyone I know. Ron and his two brothers were affectionately known as the Three Blind Mice, and all were inducted into the Idaho Hall of Fame for umpires. Ron has dedicated his life to public service for the city of Coeur d'Alene. I'm proud to nominate him for the Rock of Fame. And then I have Charlie.
Here, Kristen.
Thank you. Thank you. And he was nominated by, did you say?
Sandy Emerson.
Sandy Emerson? Oh, Sandy's so nice. Okay, a lifetime of service to the City Parks and Recreation Department, including initially in youth sports programs, and a son of a city maintenance employee who was killed on the job in a tragic vehicle accident when Nip's boys were young. His uncle Reuben coached Charlie and his brothers in youth sports programs beginning in the 1950s. Charlie played youth baseball from the beginning of some of the first programs offered under Red Halpern as a new Parks and Rec Department supervisor. Red hired Charlie during the summers, high school, and as one of the early employees involved in playfield supervision and grounds maintenance. After the Mullen Park apartments were removed, Red instructed Charlie and Jim Johnson, another young ball player, working summers for the city parks, to cut out the sod for a new regulation hardball field to be next to Tubbs Hill and the lake. Talk about history from the beginning. This was about 1962, and the Legion baseball team practiced and played games there along with high school team home games. Charlie maintained the field there and at Memorial Field, including lining and raking the infields and officiating as well as coaching teams were needed. He not only played on the high school and Legion teams, but also coached, including as his boys, played baseball and basketball. And he had for a coach Elmer Jordan, who took him under his wing after his father died. Winning the state basketball championship was a highlight in 1963 when he was tabbed the most valuable player in the state tournament. After playing college baseball and on scholarship at Whitworth University in Spokane and teaching and coaching high school baseball and basketball at Lake Oswego, Oregon, Charlie and his wife Susan from Spokane, but with family roots in Coeur d'Alene, returned with their two sons to live and start businesses back home in Coeur d'Alene in 1974. Charlie continued to coach teams in the city parks department programs. Mayor Woodwire noted that Charlie was his coach at one time. And Charlie himself had worked and played Little League through high school ball. He has helped support recreation programs as a team sponsor. The Landing and Mr. Steak restaurants were Charlie's. And as a citizen volunteer on boards and associations, ending up as chairman of the initial Urban Renewal Economic Development Organization, the Lake City Development Corporation. With Charlie's help and guidance, this economic driver was initially formed with one of its main goals to improve and reconstruct McEwen Field, the city parking lot, to a year-round multi-purpose park for people of all ages with a splash pad, climbing structure, basketball, tennis, pickleball courts, and walking and biking trails, plus open green spaces. New softball fields and regulation Legion Field were constructed at Ramsey Park, and tennis and pickleball courts at Cherry Hill Park to replace and relocate the courts and fields under the city guidelines for having as good or better replacement facilities to make room for the McEwen Park improvements. As part of the new park features and amenities, Charlie and his business partner Steve Meyer and their wives donated funds to preserve their original park conceptual plan that includes a large sundial art feature in the prominent Front Street overlook. Without that substantial help, at a critical time, the park would not be as complete or have the same appeal as a place-making park. This feature set the early tone for the quality and character of the landmark park, where it is still in its critical formative stages, thanks to Nip and Meyer, generosity and leadership in the key moments in time. Almost done, but he's done a lot. Under the leadership and credibility of Charlie's wife Susan of We Sing Publications fame, the Nips together established the Mudgee and Millie Trail, following Susan's engaging storybook tale that supports the Coeur d'Alene Library Foundation, has become a further source of city parks enhancements and character. From the very beginning, in over 60 years now, Charlie Nip has not only been a participant, but also a City Parks and Rec employee with a family legacy, but is a product of Coeur d'Alene Parks Department. He's been giving back since returning with his family in the early 70s. His work efforts have supported and improved youth athletic programs and even enhanced the physical character of city parks. He exemplifies the positive nature of the city's Park and Recreation Department and its programs. I appreciate the opportunity to nominate a friend and most deserving longtime supporter and lifetime participant, volunteer, and benefactor to this city, and in particular, its Parks and Recreation program. Sincerely, Sandy Emerson. That was
Thank you, Christy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Any further comment, discussion? Is there anybody in the audience who would like to speak to the nominees tonight? Okay. What's your pleasure?
I'll make a motion that all three candidates are approved for the Rock of Fame.
Second?
Okay. No. Motion's been made by Commissioner Wood and seconded by Commissioner Hill to recommend approval of our three nominees, which are Scott Reed, Ron Eniger, and Charlie Knipp, to the Rock of Fame. Any further discussion?
I guess under discussion, all three of these individuals have been quite noteworthy in their contributions to our park system.
Incredible.
Sets a pretty good standard for the type of folks that we see on the Rock of Fame, and really think it's well done this year.
Yeah.
Anything further? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I guess that stops right there, doesn't it, Bill, as far as approvals for the
Correct.
nominees to the Rock of
You're
Fame?
the authority, and as soon as the rock is warm enough, we'll get the engravers out there to put the names on there.
We have a, kind of due to the Memorial Parks construction over this last year, we have last year's nominees that have yet to be honored in ceremony there. Do you have any thoughts on
We were
how we
thinking
take care
about
of
trying
that
to get
with
over
the
there
new
to do a sort of a grand opening, and there was some internal discussion about maybe a press release in the paper that would just recognize all of them.
Mr. Chair, and when I talked to Bill about it, maybe forgotten a little bit, but I was hoping that the Rock of Fame recipients would go in the Arbor Day press release. Is that possible? Even though they won't be on the rock?
Right. Well, maybe. I think that already went out today
Oh,
for
okay.
tomorrow. So I think, is that right, Nick?
We'll do a second release next week.
Very good. So we'll get it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, our final agenda item tonight is a presentation regarding the Centennial Trail Midway Project. Bill, you want to go ahead and introduce our presenters tonight?
You bet. You are going to see a couple of familiar faces here. About a year and a half or maybe a quarter ago, Doug Eastwood and I met out at Riverstone Park to discuss a green belt. As you drive into the park on Tilford Lane, there was some, between the trail and the entrance to the park, there was just some no man's land that was just native stands of grasses and weeds that we mow. And so he came to me and asked me about an idea of a green belt, and I thought it was a good one. I then hadn't heard much about it, and had an opportunity a couple weeks back to see the concept that John Mueller shared with me. And it's a nice concept. It's a good plan. It's grander than what I had initially had thought as a green belt, but that's what you're here to see this evening. And so with that, I'll have Doug come up, and I think he wants to say a few things before John went into his PowerPoint.
Isn't Doug on the Rock of Fame?
Welcome back, Doug.
I think he is.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and no offense, but if I had my druthers, I'd rather be bowling. But I do want to make one comment. I want to compliment your staff for the condition of this building. I don't get in here that often, but this place looks as good today as it did when you dedicated it, what, 08, 07? It's beautiful. When I walk into a building like this, I have a really bad habit of looking at ceiling tiles for leaks. There's none here, no stains on the floor. Great job. Pass that on to Jay and Howard. They have done a
Mr.
really,
Gould is
really
all
good
responsible
job.
for that. Thank you.
So I'm just going to spend a moment introducing Mr. Mueller, But before I do that, I want to share some things with you you may have not heard before. I'm pretty sure you haven't. The North Idaho Centennial Trail that you're all very familiar with, and you folks in the audience probably haven't heard this either, this trail has the fingerprints of 3 United States presidents on it. Ronald Reagan, President Reagan, signed the budget appropriation in 1987-88 that gave us our seed money to build this trail and the trail in Washington. We needed 2.4 million. They needed about 6 million. We got 1.35 through the appropriation. They got just a little under 3. The purpose was they were not going to appropriate everything. They wanted us to raise the other half, which created ownership, which we did, raise the additional million. Right after the election in 1988, George Bush became the president. On his trip to the Northwest, he was invited by then Speaker of the House, Tom Foley, to stop in Spokane, which he took up the offer and he did. Tom Foley took him out on the trail and they dedicated their section in 1989. President Reagan signed the appropriation to give us the funds. George Bush came out and cut the ribbon to open up one section of the trail. 11 years later, the Clinton administration wanted the United States to celebrate the millennium. And he contacted every governor in every state and our territories and asked them to provide the White House with some information on various things that would create a Millennium Legacy status. And one of the things he wanted was trail connectivity and the importance of trails throughout the country. Then Governor Phil Batt nominated the North Idaho Centennial Trail. It went to the White House. Your Centennial Trail is the only one in the state that was awarded the Millennium Trail Legacy, and it's only 1 out of 50. 3 presidents have had their fingerprints on this project. I doubt if there's too many trails in this country that can say that. So I'm going to walk on through this with you. This is the logo, which you're all familiar with. The Spokane folks, when we started way back in the mid-1980s, came up with the logo idea. We modified it with a different color scheme, but that's what you'll find on all 62 miles, so there's continuity of the trail. This is the logo that we were awarded with our Millennium Legacy Trail status. And hang on a minute here because
The arrow's on top, the upper left. See the arrows?
it's not that one, is it?
No, keep going left. Right there.
That one.
Right, no, to the right. Okay.
That's, am I on the right place?
Yeah, there you go.
This is just a little bit of trivia for you. In this past year, we set out about 9 counters along the trail. We're working on an economic impact study with one of the professors at the University of Idaho, and we're getting about 420,000 users per year through most of the trail corridor. The trail corridor east of town, Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive, that one gets counted annually by the Idaho Department of Parks and Recreation, and they're running about 450,000 users per year through that corridor. A lot of people are out using this trail. This next item, the third bullet on there, is the one that's very conservative, and you're going to get some greater numbers on that in about 60 days. There's 3 events that the Trail Foundation puts on. It's the Coeur d'Alene Marathon, Ales for the Trail, and the Coeur d'Alene Fondo. Those 3 events, with all the people that come into town, the funds that are spent, generates about $1.2 million annually in new money into the community. That's just those 3 events directly related to the trail. There's other events. The Coeur d'Alene Parks Department schedules 7 or 8 more events, fundraisers, et cetera. Those are going to be included in this study that's coming out. So the amount of new dollars that is directly related to the trail is going to be pretty incredible. And it's not just the events, but it's real estate value. It's the funds that come into the businesses that are within close proximity to it. So the study's coming out. It's about 40 pages long. We're wrapping up some of the final details right now. So it should be out, I'm thinking, by mid to late May. This right here is a quitclaim deed that came to the North Idaho Centennial Trail Foundation from Union Pacific Railroad back in '06. They actually quitclaimed that railroad property that we're going to be talking about tonight to the foundation. And there was an incredible deal being made that involved quite a few parties. It was the city of Coeur d'Alene, the Trail Foundation, Ignite, North Idaho College, Bureau of Land Management. There were 5 or 6 entities. It was a very fragile house of cards. The deal didn't quite come through the way everybody expected it to. But the foundation wound up with the property in 2006. In 2012, they transferred ownership to Ignite, and Ignite, a few days later, transferred ownership to the city. You're the owner of most of that property today. As soon as that happened, it was '06, we put together a greenbelt plan that would have followed that entire corridor through the Riverstone complex. This right here is the area we're talking about tonight, but this was done in around in 2007. That could have created that greenbelt then, but everybody got pretty busy with a few other things. Riverstone Park was being built in '07, '08. The pond was going in, and there were a myriad of other things. And a really fortunate thing came along when a developer needed a utility corridor from Hawks Nest and the landings to bring his sewers and other things into Coeur d'Alene, and was able to use that corridor in exchange for putting our trail in. So a lot of great things happened. The trail came in. We never really got back to the greenbelt because of so many other things that were going on at that point in time. 2 years ago, we updated that plan. This is the one that you've seen recently. This is the corridor, once again, that we're talking about. This includes an expansion of parking. The parking lot that was down here is the same parking lot, same location, but it does expand it. It allows for a drop-off area now along the trail corridor, adds about 7 or 8 more parking stalls to it. More importantly, and what's not real visible on here, is along the Tilford Lane, as you enter into the park, that is diagonal parking and adds about 40 more stalls along that area. And then, of course, creates the green belt, cleans the whole area up, becomes basically an extension of Riverstone Park, and allows even for additional events that could occur. What you're going to hear about tonight is the significance of the trail itself, but the impact the railroads have had on the entire region, and something that we want to capture historically in this project. Everywhere you go on the trail, there's remnants of the railroad. This first slide in the upper left is a 3-mile corridor from Pleasant View Road all the way into the city of Post Falls, Spokane Street. We acquired that for $139,000 back in 1988-89 from Union Pacific. This one you probably all remember, the one in the upper right. That's when the railroad came through McEwen, came down Front Street, went right down the middle of Mullen Avenue. until that one came out. And this was the trail corridor for quite a while until we rebuilt McEwen. The one in the lower left, that's the area we're talking about tonight. This is the Centennial Trail. Over here is Tilford Lane, and it's everything in between that we want to be talking about and working on. This one I put in just for historical trivia, but this is the railroad tracks that came through the city park. And the thing that we forget about is we had playground equipment right alongside the railroad tracks. The railroad cars would come in and sometimes park here for days, severing the ability for people to leave the parking lot and get into the park without crawling over, crawling under, or going around these large flatbeds. This was moved to the west side of the park in 1997. And, matter of fact, if you want to help your Parks Department out and raise some additional funds, I think you can buy a railroad spike that was pulled out of here when the railroad left in 2004, and they gave them their old spikes. They cleaned them up, and on the spike is the dates of the railroad when it was built in 1903 and when it came out in 2004. And they have pieces of the actual rail you can buy for a paper holder.
That would be cool.
And where is our next slide? Any help there on that one, Mr. Mueller? It's not coming up.
Well, we can close out that, and I can...
They're gone. So you're not going to get to see the rest of them. One of them that I'm going to leave you with was a quote by Governor Cecil Andrus. He wanted to take a tour of the trail before all the appropriations came and before we broke ground, and it was called a show me tour because he had been hearing so much about it. One of the things that he said in that show me tour is, this is pretty phenomenal. 50 years from now, people are going to look back and say what vision you people had when you put this thing in. Hasn't been 50 years, but I think people are saying that anyway. With that, I'm going to invite John up, and he's going to walk you through the project that we've been talking about for a while. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks, Doug. Hi, everybody. How are you?
John.
We'll close out here, and the neat thing about this is, let me just see here. Let me look through here and find computer, this computer. There we go. And let me just see here what we got. And it's nice to have a backup or two or three. We'll see what this looks like. And going down, we'll just find Doug's quote. Strangely enough, we do PDF backups because they don't explode. Only this time the PDF exploded. So that's the quote Doug was talking about. And certainly as we go forward, the project that I want to talk to you about, Doug gave you kind of an overview of the Midway or the Greenbelt project. The concept of the Midway comes forward. My parlance at the end of the 19th century and into the 20th century, America had a number of World's Fairs, and we saw the Midway emerge in the Chicago World's Fair in 1893. When the fairgrounds were built, they had a whole host of other people that wanted to come in after the fact. And so the Midway became the off-Broadway setting that connected to the World's Fair and all these other activities for people to engage in, as you can see with this picture. And it turns out that the Midway became one of the most favorite spots of these World's Fairs. Essentially, it's a long, linear space. And so when you consider what we were trying to do with this same long, linear space, we wanted just to create a series of small activity areas along the way that were connected. That would allow flexibility for things like skills fairs or say, weekend events, farmers markets, if you had an exhibit of sculptures, but essentially we would have a series of small spaces graded and shaped with some concrete pads, and so the opportunity to come in for multi-use activities, or if you're riding along the trail, just a cool place to kind of stop and hang out if you want to. And the notion was that we would plant a whole bunch of extra trees, create a lot of shade, and as Doug said, kind of pull the park boundary to Beebe Boulevard down that corridor and extend that green space going forward. Once we completed this and talked about it, I think Doug also talked about the expansion in the parking, an expanded drop-off at the park. But they began to talk about another project in the Greenbelt because we had these activity areas. They maybe wanted to take it one step further, and this notion of the Transcontinental Railroad or the Railroad Memorial came forward as a place to be located at perhaps one of those activity sites. And as we look at the red circle, we talked about up and down the line what would make the most sense in terms of the location. We sort of landed it in this spot simply because we had parking close by. We wouldn't create conflict maybe with the new drop-off area, but we also had a new residential area coming in just, I guess, just east and south of that, and we didn't want to create too much commotion there. So with that in mind, I began to kind of take a look at what might inform the design of a public space that would remember railroads. And so you do an image search, and what you begin to find is there's a lot of cool stuff out there. And in my business, it's like, it always starts out, wouldn't it be cool if we did this or we considered that? So you start to see these railroad yards in America, and they were all over. We had 7 or 8 transcontinental railroads. They had rail yards everywhere. But you start to see these structures like the water towers and the gantries and these hoists and the stuff they did, you know, which was pretty cool in terms of an industrial look. And the more you look, the more you see common things. And so taking this forward, we began to see some images and some shapes and some patterns, a language that might help us in terms of going forward. What you're looking at here are a series of roundhouses, and the roundhouses were the places where they serviced the locomotives and fixed the cars and brought them in, and in the center of them they had this carriage that rotated around, and so they would bring a train in, uncouple the car, put it on the carriage and rotate it around, and then they would push it into one of these sheds, a piece of these sheds, and work on them. And so a really strong form, a really strong idea to work with and to take forward. And the more you look, the more you find is that, in fact, some of these roundhouses have been converted to visitor centers and museums for railroads across America. So with that in mind, that became a strong image to take forward. Also, we began to look at the carriage and the radiating tracks coming out. And then these gantries or these hoists, you know, that they would somehow, they might pull a motor or they might pull some cargo or something off one of these trains, you know, these overhead arches. And so it sort of began to kind of inform a series of pieces or parts to a design. The strength of the roundhouse concept, the carriage, the gantries, all that. And as I sat down and talked with their group, I just did this real quick thumbnail sketch, and it's kind of, you know, quick and dirty. But we have about 60 feet from the road edge to the edge of the pines. And so in thinking about how we might lay this in and work it around with the trail, I came up with this idea where maybe we would have the trail on one side, but we'd create this little eddy to the other side, to the north side, to do a memorial to the transcontinental railroads, which led to this tighter drawing right here, which then led to this color drawing right here, which gives you an idea in plan looking down at it. And what you're seeing is the trail as it exists today would move through, but we would create this at-grade plaza with the carriage and a series of arches to enter into it from either direction. And then the radiating tracks coming out. And then where you see these shortened white arcs, those would be opportunities for interpretive structures, short wall or signage or something to where we could begin to tell the story of the transcontinental railroads. So looking at this in plan image might be a little tough to kind of discern what we're talking about, but taking it forward, and we do have some imagery to talk about, there is plenty in terms of the history to talk about in terms of railroads. This photograph actually is, you can see it's a postcard, but it says it's the first train to Coeur d'Alene City, Idaho, and that's what they called Coeur d'Alene back in those days. We know that Corbin, D.C. Corbin, built the first rail line, came down 3rd Street. Eventually, the Northern Pacific bought him out. And if you look, you can see the letters Northern Pacific here. So I don't believe this is 1885, but maybe a little later when that acquisition was made. And this, of course, is the 3rd Street corridor. And this is a photograph that was overexposed, and they came back and kind of accentuated it with pencil and filled in the gaps. And so the railroads did play a big role. This is looking the other way. This is where they came. And why did they come here? It's because Corbin also went up to the Coeur d'Alene mines and he built a narrow gauge railroad to, from the mines to the Cataldo Mission. And the lake boats went up to the mission and they loaded the ore on the boats and they brought it to 3rd Street and they hauled it out. And that's how the silver and the gold and the various ores that they were mining came to Coeur d'Alene and then out to Spokane. And so our little town went from this little railhead, you can see again the 3rd Street, the lake boats. This is late 1880s, early 1890s. And in a very short period of time, we had this massively industrial waterfront that came forward. Eventually, the railroads did make their way into the Silver Valley, and so the mining ceased to be a cargo thing. But we do know, based on all we've heard today, about the mills and your comments about the Atlas Mill project, lumbering took over. And we hauled a lot of logs and a lot of timber from the waterfront of Coeur d'Alene. And this is what, you know, our waterfront looked like. This is, if you were standing in the water at Independence Point, the beach at Independence Point, looking back north, that's what you would have seen in that day. And so the railroads played a significant role. If you look closely at this photograph, this is McEwen Field. There's City Hall. There's the Catholic Church. And so we're looking right up 6th Street in the middle of this. And this is all cribs of lumber that's seasoning and air drying. And so lumbering and timber was a huge cargo thing for the railroads. And of course, then our waterfront just blew off the map into this massively industrial waterfront. So anyways, significant impact. What can we do? There's all kinds of constructs and things that we can carry forward in this memorial in terms of signage. There's so much you can do now with stone and walls that we could tell a really terrific story about the railroads in Coeur d'Alene. There's also opportunities for public art, either whether we talk about the lineman or the steward or who's managing traffic, getting on the train. This piece on the right is for the Underground Railroad in a Civil War memorial somewhere in the South. And so if you look at this again and you follow this green line, that might be an activity line of somebody who enters this and he sort of wanders his way around through this memorial. But every red dot is an opportunity for signage or a message or some kind of interpretive action. And so there are a ton of possibilities. And so to give you just a little better look at how this might go forward, you recognize the form of the gantry or the arch from the rail yard. This would be an entry arch, the trail here. So as you come into this, I think this view is from the northwest coming to the southeast. The plaza would sit back behind these trees, but opportunity for lighting and banners and this kind of this arrival experience. This is looking at it coming from the south. We would maintain trail flow, but then you begin to see these short walls or these constructs where we could put messages, where we could really have a lot of fun in telling the story of the railroads. Let's see if I can get this mouse to work a little better here. And then looking at it from the air, you kind of get a 3D perspective of how the plaza would work. Short retaining wall here. But you get an idea of the shape, how it would feel, how people would make use of it, kind of the abstract railroad trackage that would become part of the pavement system for the plaza and going forward. And so with that, we had a chance to kind of present this to the Trail Foundation, they really liked it and appreciated it, wanted to kind of take it forward, and there was unanimous, I think, consensus. They adopted this to kind of take this forward as a project to begin to talk about with you all and to raise some money to build. And so with that, if you have questions or you have comments, I know this is informational, no action required tonight, but we wanted to make you aware of this and what we're thinking. This is entirely consistent. When we did the Centennial Trail way back in '89 and '90, one of the pieces we wanted to have was a historical interpretive program to go with it. But as Doug talked about, the federal appropriation said we're going to fund only 50%, roughly, maybe a little higher, but you can only build a trail. That's all you can do. If you want to do the rest of it, you have to do yourself. And so the cultural, historical, interpretive piece had to wait. And so it's projects like this that we had hoped to maybe come along and do after the fact. And so this is the idea that I brought forward and worked with them on. I was really pleased that Doug asked me to, and the Trail Foundation asked me to come forward. I had done the work on Riverstone Park, and as Doug said, that initial concepting when the Prairie Trail piece came forward. And so we had talked about a lot of the things, including the parking additions that you see today, way back then. And so this sort of kind of wraps the whole thing up as another project to raise funds for and to carry forward. So with that, if you have questions or you have comments or thoughts, either myself or Doug, I suppose, could come back up here and provide answers for you to the best of our ability.
John, can you go back to one of the earlier slides that kind of has the whole overview of the Midway concept?
There's that.
That's fine. I know it's kind of very early in its design development, but has there been any discussion amongst your group as to what rough costs would be to develop as you've proposed it?
Well, if you look at the square footages of the Greenbelt piece, Scott, the square footages don't lie. You know, to irrigate it, to plant the trees, to do the earthwork, to do all the things that we have talked about doing, is somewhere between $200,000 and $250,000. Okay, and that's basic landscape development. That would take you from BB Boulevard all the way. I think we've taken this in terms of the tree planting scheme all the way, I think, to the restroom building, but essentially going from the edges to the tree line. Okay. And then the price for the memorial, depending again how extensively we want to develop the interpretive piece. I think we have almost 40 opportunities for signage and for different kinds of interpretive opportunities. Again, remembering that we had 7 transcontinental railroads. We had a guy named Blackwell who built an electric railroad, came to Coeur d'Alene. So that plaza and that project, and I'll take that back forward, the cost on the plaza is about $350,000 if we were to take it to its full extent. And so again, as you say, we don't have fully developed design, but the square footages and the units don't lie. It's a project that's very simply constructed. There's no extravagant materials, but we do use some colored concrete and some metal inserts to do the tracks. We're thinking there would be lighting all up and down the corridor, special lighting for this. And then the interpretive signage is and can be a very expensive piece, depending upon the direction you go for fit and finish.
The current trail would remain on its existing path, with the exception of where it passes through the plaza?
We are not realigning the trail in any fashion. I think when we talked to the Trail Foundation, I think initially they were concerned as to how this might work. There has been some discussion that maybe we might minimize some of the things happening maybe on the left side of this image to promote better continued flow. So I think there's some more discussion to have to that end. But essentially trail use would be maintained. you would just pass under the arches or those gantry forms, but you would still have unimpeded bike and pedestrian flow from one end to the other.
Okay, yep. Jim?
John, could you run me through where this is at in Riverstone Park? I'm not absolutely
I
clear where
will
the
do that,
plaza
Jim.
is at.
I can show you. Let me run back up here to these aerial photographs. If you look, this red circle, Jim, is just at the southeast corner of the parking lot.
Okay.
Okay, and so that's where this would happen from edge of road to edge of trees. Okay, just off the parking lot. And the reason we had chosen that is because we were expanding parking, we were providing some additional handicap parking, we were going to provide a drop-off, a widened trail section up to about 25 feet, so you could pull in, unload a bike, but not impede traffic. And then, as we took this forward, we really thought siting this across from this parking lot would be a better way, a better site to place it. And so that's where this would be located. If you can imagine the longtime building that John Stone had his offices in, it's right across from that, or would be located right across from that.
So the rest of the Greenbelt area that you want to improve for possible events or whatever you might do, that
Is from
give a more detailed plan of how that might look tonight, or is that something you have that we could see at a later date?
Well, I did have a more detailed plan, and so I'm wondering here if there is a way that I can just take this in and just do that, fiddle with this a little bit. This is almost to the max, but this is essentially what, in greater detail, what this would look like. Here is Beebe Boulevard. Here is the trail as it leaves Beebe, and so we're looking at creating these little pockets through earthwork and planting of trees. And so I've numbered them to show just, again, the number of potential activity areas that could be created. We want to kind of plant both sides of the street with shade trees, but you can see how we would develop the parking, angled parking coming back out or to the southeast. And let me see if I can pull this down a little further. You can see that we would be adding this bay onto the parking area, coming into the area at one-way traffic flow. We would have angled parking. We would have a drop-off area so you could unload a bike. And then access the trail and move on. There's additional handicap parking here. The trail would continue to move through the memorial. The plaza would be seated right here. And if you recall, this is the parking area. You saw the photograph, and John Stone's building, or the building now is, I think it's a bank, maybe, sits right there. So again, we would have a series of shade trees and smaller trees planted for color. But the idea is to have a series of activity areas. As I talked about earlier, you have this long linear space you're breaking up into.
Are you proposing to have diagonal parking along the road all the way coming in? And second question is, are you accessing those pads just from the Centennial Trail or also from the roadside?
Answer the first question, the diagonal parking is as you would come out or come back out Beebe Boulevard. Excuse me, Tilford Lane. Sorry, got my lanes and my roads mixed up here. So you can see the angles. You pull through, come out, and pull in and park like that. Sure. And you could also, I suppose, pull up and back in, as sometimes is done, and actually is becoming more and more popular. Second question was, I'm sorry, Jim?
Are you accessing those pads, the different event pads, from the roadside as well as the Centennial Trail side?
That is possible, yes. I think it depends upon the kind of activity you would have there. And certainly, if you look here, it's fairly narrow. So if you had to come in from that side, you could do so.
The pond, point your arrow where the pond is.
The pond, let me see if I can find the pond here. It's off the photo, so
Yeah, it's just, but it's up,
I would say the pond is probably right here.
okay.
So if we go back, Bridget, just so you can see, let me zoom back out here.
Oh, there it is.
So this is where we were. This is the parking lot. This is the new drop-off area.
Okay,
That's the relationship.
yeah, okay.
Okay?
Mr. Chair.
Christie?
John, you do beautiful work. I know this. You can look right out there and see your work. The only question I would have about the Tilford Lane piece, you want to put a lot of trees there. And I'm there a lot. And when it's cold, and it's cold here a lot in Idaho, I don't walk on the trail because it's so shaded on that one area, so there's always ice there the longest, and it's just cold. So I walk on Tilford Lane where it's nice and sunny. And so I don't want you to make both of them cold. I mean, it just seems like there's way too many trees. We need some sunlight through there.
Okay. Well, I think that's reasonable input to talk about.
But it's beautiful what you've done, and I don't know what happens from here as far as if there's, maybe Doug wants to speak, whether there's federal dollars you'll be seeking or, but it's beautiful, and I hope that some federal dollars are out there.
A couple things on that. And before I answer that question, one of the reasons we're here tonight is because this property right here is in dual ownership. You own the majority of it, you being the city of Coeur d'Alene. What we're doing through this request is asking that this property be encumbered for this Greenbelt project. So we'd like to come back in about a month, since give you enough time to work through it, digest it, and then come back with a request or a recommendation to encumber the Union Pacific Railroad right-of-way so we can proceed to start getting everything in order to do this. We can't kick off a fundraiser or do anything unless you're on board. And so it's the encumbering of that corridor that helps us do that. Where's some of the funding coming from? One of the things that will help initially right out of the chute, the North Idaho Centennial Trail Foundation is also a property owner along this corridor. John Stone donated almost 900 linear feet of property, and I can't remember the width, it's about 20 feet wide. By him doing that, that enables them to apply for a federal grant in the value of that land. Your property is not eligible, being the city of Coeur d'Alene. You're not eligible for the same thing that a foundation is eligible for. So they will hold that property till such time that they can apply for that type of a grant, which is in 2020. That's why the timing right now is perfect to get started, because it's going to take a while to put all the pieces in place. The value of that property is probably going to put them somewhere in 25 to 30% of the funding to do the project. The interim is going to come through the fundraising efforts that they will be working on with regards to sponsorships and donors. And let's not forget the railroads that will also be solicited to participate. We're not here tonight to ask you for any financial support, but at the same time, in-kind participation is always valuable. You've got some big earth-moving equipment and some grading and other things, and there may be a point in time where, yeah, it's worth saying, how can we help? But we're not asking you for that tonight. What we're looking for is to encumber your property into this Greenbelt concept, and we would take it from there and keep you folks posted at that point. And we need the time to get it all worked out. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you, Doug.
Great. Anything else?
Doug and John, is there a plat map or something that could be overlaid to your, your design plan that kind of shows what the parts and pieces and ownerships are, in other words, what section is city-owned, what is Ignite have, what the Centennial Trail, all the participating players. So the jigsaw puzzle, and kind of overlay and kind of see how those all parts and pieces fit on your concept plan.
There is a plat map that shows that.
Yeah.
I think the foundation owns 20 feet from Tilford going south. You own 60 feet beyond that going south, and then Ignite owns another 60 feet, which is the Burlington Northern Railroad. One of the things that you had mentioned about it being cold and slippery and icy is there's a row of pine trees all along that entire area. We would prefer those stay, but be thinned out. They could be cleaned out and thinned out really nice, and you've got, your own urban forester here that could come in and make short work of all that.
Dick, I want to talk with you about that.
But you've got some specimen trees in there, but you've got a lot of volunteers that need to come out, and that's going to help. And it also clears it up and allows people to actually see through there and see right into the river. But to answer your question, yeah, there is a plat map that shows all of it.
Okay.
Scott, the city does have, if you go to the city's website, under planning, they have a searchable map. It's a pretty cool tool to use, mostly for zoning, planning and zoning action, but you can go right to this site and take a look and see. And it shows the property lines, it'll give you zoning, it'll give you, I think, even ownerships if you want. So if you're curious and want to get that sooner rather than later, that's available as well.
Okay. What other groups have you presented the concept to other than Park and Rec at this point? I know your own foundation, the Centennial Trail Foundation, but have you presented to Ignite or any other groups that would have skin in the game on this?
No, the Riverstone HOA has been involved to some degree putting this together. Matter of fact, a little more extensively than some degree. The Riverstone, I can't remember what their exact name is, LLC. No presentations, so to speak, other than what's been presented at the Trail Foundation to get to this point. And then we thought the next step is you folks. You're the property owner. So we need to go here and get this thing out there.
Okay.
Well, Scott, I might add, I'm looking forward to looking at this more in depth. Personally, when I drive down there, I feel like the park's not really quite completed yet, and I think this would tie everything together. We worked for a long time on all our areas of trying to make connectivity, and so the concept is beautiful. I'm sure we've got a lot more detail to look at in terms of cost and pulling all this together, but overall, I really like the idea. Just, I know we're not ready for that yet, but.
So imagine this, it's all completed and we're looking back on it. There's a huge arts and crafts event going from BB Boulevard all the way into the park. There's food vendors, and off in the distance, over by the side of the pond, you hear this music. And who is that? It's the Rhythm Dogs.
I had to go there.
No, we're not ready to sign a contract yet.
No, I love the potential this has for the connectivity of the parks and kind of completing that western border of Riverstone and having that connectivity along the trails to the Atlas Park and everything. And it just really would really connect all of our waterfront public spaces and activities along the way.
Yeah, I would second third or fourth the previous sentiments. Yeah, it's a real good fit. And so I don't see it as encumbering it. I see it as reserving it for that use pending the funding.
Much better choice of words, thank you. What do you need from us going forward to bring it back for a recommendation?
Well, Jim,
Yeah, I'd like
what kind of pieces of information would you like to
Just the last
study?
bit that we were going over, I'd like to see just a little more detailed look at, so I get in my mind where those pads are and how it all fits in, and, You know, that's what I'd like to see.
That's the challenge, Jim, with the scale of this project.
Yes.
When you have a drawing that's 1 to 600, you know, when you detail an area,
Right.
it's really tough to kind of zoom down into it. And so I think there's more discussion. I appreciate your patience because I think Bill and I were going back and forth about how much to present or how much detail or how far in the weeds you want to get on this. And there's plenty of time and plenty of room for discussion about that and trees.
Well, I think another walk in the park down the trail, and then you can start to point out that we did that not too long ago, and it really helped to look at the Atlas property by doing that. Having somebody saying this is where this would go and this is what it would look like, that would help.
Happy to do that.
And I would like to see a summary of what Doug explained on possible financing of the project, because you've said you're not going to ask the city to finance this, which I think is.
At this point.
At this point, oh, well, and I think that's appropriate because they're in the middle of major park renovation at the moment. And so if you have obviously thought this through on where you might find the funds, and it would be great to have that in a summary.
Is this, as far as kind of studying this, Jim, and looking at it further, is this something you'd want on a workshop agenda?
Sure.
You know, I think one thing that would help some clarity so we know what area we're precisely reserving would be to have that plat map with the boundaries as an exhibit relative to what, just maybe ghost in the proposed concept over that so that we can be real clear. This is the area that we want to make sure we're addressing.
So I just heard the word workshop. Would you like to do that before your next meeting, is have a workshop specifically on this and go over all the details that
Well,
that
if I heard your request accurately, is that our next monthly meeting, you'd like to come back for this to be an action item from this commission to hopefully get our endorsement and recommendation on reserving the city-owned portion of this into this concept. Is that right?
Correct.
So how does the commission feel about this being on our next workshop agenda, to where you can have time to think about what's been presented tonight and then come back with some more questions or clarifications you feel you might need?
Yeah, that'd be good.
I feel like I need more.
Yeah, it would be great. What do we have already set for the coming
Well, it's not
workshop?
that. What I prefer to do, and of course we can bring it to as a workshop, but I'd like to work with these gentlemen a little more closely about this design. It's pretty grand. There hasn't been much discussion about maintenance. There hasn't been much discussion about overall cost of maintenance. I've got some of my own ideas, as a lot of people look at some plans we've brought forward with their own ideas, and we modify those plans, as you've seen many times on the Atlas stuff we've been working on. So I'd like to have an opportunity to sit down and discuss that before we bring it to you for a workshop and maybe hammer out some details that I have some concerns about.
Our next
before we
workshop
bring it
is
to you guys.
roughly, it's about 3 weeks out, 3 weeks from tomorrow.
And I wonder if that's too quick.
I
know
believe
you'd
it
like
is.
to
I
move it
mean,
a month, but I'm
normally-
wondering, with you meet, and then after that, then we can meet.
And let me say this, I endorse this in concept, absolutely. I think it's a great opportunity for us, and as they've demonstrated, we've talked about this for years. The angle parking, Doug and I talked about it right after the park went in, and there was a trail that went nowhere because of the way things worked out. It's already there. You almost have to just put in some stripes and make it happen. Not as nice as this, but I'm just saying it's been spoken to. Right. And so that additional parking would be a boon for us. But I'd just like to have a chance to sit down and talk about some of the details. There may be some cost-saving things that we can do to help along with what this idea is. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot. I talked to John in his office about how, and even the foundation had voiced a concern about how the trail comes through the roundhouse area. And I can see there was a couple people at some of our workshops and our meetings that talked about how quickly people drive through there and almost run you over. And so I'd like to see some sort of mitigation between the folks that are looking at all this neat historical stuff and the bicyclists that are coming through there moving at a clip. And so I think there's a whole bunch of stuff that we can work out and make this thing come forward at some point.
Mr. Chair, you know.
I know they need some solidification from us to go after these grants. I understand that, but I just like to slow down a little bit.
I think Bill has a really good point in the fact that city staff hasn't worked with you yet. And so for us to exclude that critical piece and just have it come straight to us to move forward, we love it, it's beautiful, but it is only fair that city staff gets involved and sees what you can come up with together. So I would agree that Bill needs
And
that
staff,
opportunity.
like Doug said, we got urban forestry right here. We also talked in the years past about thinning that out.
Yeah,
And we
good.
talked about that whole piece. And so there's some nice views, as Doug said. There's a lot of seedlings that can come out of there. There's a lot of trees that are unhealthy. And if we clean that stand up, those existing trees are going to get better. You'll get your sunlight.
Thank goodness.
What might be a timeline for a workshop so that we can,
Well, let me work
Some
with
of those
these gentlemen to
details.
find out when we can get together and how we can start working through this, so there's some comfort level for me, and we'll see what we can do here in the next month or two.
Bill, why don't you keep us apprised?
Will do.
And as you kind of gather the information, work out the details, kind of give us a heads up
You bet.
when next soonest it can come before
And
us.
maybe not what Doug and John want. Next time, maybe we'll come back with a revised plan, some more information that might address some of your concerns, that we're getting closer to that goal that the foundation's looking for endorsement.
Okay.
Will that meet the time frame for you, Doug? We're not going to try to kick it down the road. We just want to give staff an opportunity to
Sure,
work with you.
that'll work. So what I think I'm hearing, we'll get together in the interim, staff, John, foundation members, work out the details, get to a comfort level that you're talking about, set it up right after that for a workshop with you folks to get your questions all answered and get you to where you need to be to make a recommendation to say, sure, we'll adopt this in concept and forward it on to the city council. So time-wise, we're probably looking at being back here for a recommendation at your June meeting. That's about 60
Okay.
days. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And try to get everything else done in between.
Okay,
that's right.
Good?
good.
All right.
Anything else for Doug and John?
Thanks.
Doug and John, appreciate it. Bill, you have anything else for this evening?
I do not, thank you.
How about any final announcements or anything from the commissioners?
Nope.
Okay, then I'll just go ahead and announce our next meeting times. Our next workshop meeting will be Tuesday, May 7th, 11:30 a.m. at Caruso's Deli here in Coeur d'Alene. And our next monthly meeting of Park and Rec Commission will be Monday, May 20th, 5:30 p.m. right here in the library community room. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made by Commissioner McDowell and seconded by Commissioner Hill for adjournment. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.